Dove and Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. Today's show is brought to you by the ATS Network, Think Big. And our wonderful guest today is Larry Center. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now you have the book out, Like No Other Boy. This is on Kindle and I believe in print.
Right.
Where did you come up with the idea for the story?
Well, I was watching a Today Show interview with a primatologist, and he was talking about possibly using chimps in a therapy with autistic children. And it just the idea hit me that, of course, it's a novel, and I was thinking, what if there was an autistic boy who was kind of like a savant who could somehow communicate with chimps, in a genius fashion that would make him like no other boy, basically. So I just came up with that idea.
So you basically took Dr. Dolittle, narrowed it down to one species instead of all species, and had the hero of the story as an autistic child, which is wonderful because it's near and dear to my heart. My daughter's autistic.
Oh, okay.
So
wow. And I spent about 10 years writing it because I didn't even know anything about, writing novels, but I just had to write it for some reason. I couldn't even let it go. So I learned so much about writing and, 10 years of rewriting, and finally finished it. And I showed it to they have freelance editors, professional people who can read your novel. And I found one who had an autistic child too. So I thought she would have, some resonance with it, because I said, well, what do you think of this? You think it's any good? And she read it and she said, I think you've written a masterpiece. She just was amazed by how good it was. She was crying, and she said it just opened up everything about her was right there in the book. It's like I read her mind practically on all the ways of raising autistic children and what she had to go through and all that. And so she showed it to a father who has an autistic boy, and he read it and he said, I stayed up all night reading and I couldn't put it down. I hadn't done that since I read Hunt for Red October by Thomas Clancy. So I was getting all this good feedback, so at that point I decided to get a literary agent and, see what would happen. So I found one, and she sent it around to all the, major publishing companies, but they weren't really interested in it. So.
Well, not all big publishing companies are interested in everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the world of indie authors.
Right.
Which is good.
It's
we
a
also
niche kind of book.
Yeah, I mean, they have, you need to have a following. You have to have, there's so many things with big publishing that you have to go through. Where if you find a smaller press publisher or even an indie publisher, or do yourself, you're free to make more choices.
Right. So I ended up, they were just not interested in it because it's too non-marketable. Like it's not a romance, not a thriller. So, but I put it on Amazon, and it's done really well. I've gotten a lot of good, 5-star reviews, and people seem to be very happy with it. So.
Oh, I'm seeing about 84 5-star reviews right now. So it's awesome.
It's done really well, and it's very rewarding to read the reviews. That, like one lady says, I thought, to me, this was the novel of the decade, things like that. So I was just really happy about it, and I'm hoping more people read it and get more reviews and slowly kind of maybe move up the charts that way. It kind of some days it comes and goes. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Amazon algorithm, we call it, of how they do this book ranking and how we find our books, find that next author that we want to read, is a little bit tricky to navigate as a publisher, as an author, as anything. But it's so rewarding when you have your number one in the divorce and separation area. You're number one in child advocacy.
Yeah.
This is one of those books, yeah, it's a fictional book, but it has so many elements that is true to life that pulls on the hearts of so many.
Yeah. It it's you would think it would just appeal to parents of autistic children, but it's really appeals to men, women, singles,
Mhm.
parents. It seems to be a universal story that just appeals to pretty much anybody. I got a lot of male reviewers on there, female reviewers, young people who not even married, and it just seems to it's a struggle story with a broken child, basically. So it seems to resonate with a lot of people.
It does. Even if you take the autistic part out of it or
Mm-hmm.
the savant part out of it, raising a child in a single family household, just
Mm-hmm.
that one element can touch so many.
Right. It's a challenge, and I had one lady. I presented to a book club, and one lady had a developmentally delayed child, and she said it was like reading this was like you were peering through my window as I raised my son. She just like I showed all the struggles that she had to go through that people with normal quote normal children. Nobody's really normal, but
Thank you for
who
saying that, because I was
yeah
kind of like, wait, we have normal? What's
yeah
normal?
well, there is no normal, but uh, you know, certain things that you just take for granted. Like the book starts out with taking the boy Tommy to the zoo, and the father leaves the zoo after he meets the chimps and all, and there's a car that the alarm goes off, creates a loud sound which startles Tommy, and it makes him go into a meltdown right there in the parking lot. And the father is like, I should have brought my earplugs. I didn't for the boy. I didn't bring earplugs, and should I get my blanket out of the trunk and try to calm him with that? And so it takes him about 20, 30 minutes to calm him down right in the parking lot, and it just shows the struggle of raising somebody who has sensitivities and
Mhm.
delays for a little bit, and then it also shows I show another section where the boy, Tommy, comes to meet through primatologists, get him together with an advanced chimp who is fictionally portrayed as a chimp with kind of a savant ability too, in terms of communication with humans. So the two get together in this, momentous event. And when you meet this chimp, his name's Albert, and they bring the boy in, and Albert's painting on an easel.
Mhm.
So the boy, interprets for the primatologist what the chimp is trying to portray. So it shows that the boy has, problems, but he also has huge savant side that, it's kind of like the brain when it gives you one genius talent, it kind of takes away from something else.
Of course.
So,
You always have balance within our bodies,
mhm,
everything. So if you deficient in one area, you're overly achieving in another. It's
right.
just balance.
Hmm.
And then we have our autistic children that are born wonderful, and they have their extreme talents. It could be in writing, mathematics, whatever it is, but to the outside world, unless you're living with that child, you don't
Right.
understand the struggles that we go through every day.
Right. So, from what I understand, people who see, for me, I never had I don't know any autistic. I didn't know any autistic children, but people seem to think this was a memoir. It's written so realistically that people always ask, "Surely this happened to me," but it didn't. It
Mhm.
didn't. I never really had these kind of. My kids were not autistic, so but it kind of like an advocacy novel for autistic parents that had what they have to go through. So I had one lady that she was so taken with the book that she took it down to a local bookstore, and they've got some copies there of it, and she kind of advocates for the book, and so it really kind of strikes people at the heart. which I
Those are the
tried.
type, yeah, those are exactly the type of books we need to be reading. We
Yeah,
need the ones that touch us in the heart, that
right,
give us the mindset to look beyond our own four walls of our house and see what the struggles of others.
right. And I didn't realize I read it, put it away and then about 6 months ago, I just started to reread it. And boy, I got through like the second chapter and I go like, God, this is hard to read. It's so emotional. And I had another lady who has a child on the spectrum, and she said, by chapter 2, I was just sobbing. It's just so emotional. It's really hard to get through in a way, but
Mhm.
if you do get through it, you feel great at the end because it gives you a nice sense of hope and, you know, happiness. And so it's a real interesting story that I hope more and more people can read.
Well, we will do what we can to get the word out because
Yeah.
I'm linked up with the autism community in my city. So I would
Hmm.
love to be able to share this with them and get their
Hmm.
feedback.
That'd
And
be
I'll
great.
probably reach out to them later today or this week.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't need just the autism parents to read this. We need other parents. We need
Oh
the
yeah.
single moms, the single dads, the
Mhm.
grandparents raising the kids. We need people to read to get insight to today's children.
Right. Well, it does feel like an advocacy book for
Mhm,
autism. It's something that people can read and get hope from and inspiration and a kind of understanding. And I'm not really sure how I wrote it, in that it more like just came out of me. It kind of unfolded out of me. It didn't really. It wasn't like I I'm such a great writer and I just wrote this. It kind of like more just came from within me somehow. I've written other novels and they're not nearly as good as this one. This is some kind of special novel that really, it's just once in a lifetime type. I'll never be able to write this kind of story again with this much emotion and universality.
mhm.
It doesn't happen very often. I mean, there are probably people out there who can do it 2 or 3 times, but I was lucky just to do it once. I just don't think I could. My
Sometimes
other
lightning,
novels.
yeah, sometimes it's good to have lightning strike once, and other times it's just a rainfall of lightning. So,
Yeah, some people I'm sure could. I resonated with it. It just seems like sometimes you just kinda meet your purpose in life, and this
mhm.
was my purpose to write this book for some reason. I can't understand it, but
Well, I know you're not writing another book like this, but are you
right.
planning to write another book at all?
Yeah, I'm writing other books. They're totally not like this one, unfortunately, but they're uh, they're totally different, and they have a lot of humor in them. And they're kind of, I don't even know if I'll even publish them because I'm still working on them, and for me it takes a long time to get it right where I feel like I can show it to people. So,
Oh, I totally get that. I mean, as an
mhm,
author myself, there's books that I'm holding on to that I started writing in 2003.
mhm,
So, and then I have other books that I published within 6 months of writing them.
yeah,
So it just really depends on how the book resonates with me as an author before I'm
right,
ready to share it with the audience.
right. This idea, just for some reason, it just struck me so big. I'd never had such a lightning bolt strike, and it's never been. I've never, I've tried to think of another idea that would is this big, and I just can't do it. And it doesn't
It's
seem to come.
it's not the thinking of the next novel. It's when inspiration hits us.
Yeah,
You were watching something that resonated within you, so you wrote what resonated within you.
right.
It's the inspiration that we find from everyday life.
Hmm. It just happened, and of course, I'm always looking out for new ideas, and
Mhm.
I do have some. I've written 3 other novels, and they're, pretty good ideas. Like, for instance, one is about, I call it personal training. It's about it's kind of a humorous thing. A CEO who's overweight, and he has a heart problem, and the doctor assigns him to a personal trainer, and she happens to be the personal trainer from hell who stalks him into good health, and he's trying to run away from her, and she's a Russian middleweight boxing champion of the world, and she doesn't let him go, and it's called personal training. But it gets very personal, so
Hmm.
something like
That's
that.
an awesome take on that.
Yeah, and
So
that's the other way I think. It's not all so, you know,
it doesn't have to
sad.
be all serious. It can be fun. It can be thrilling. It can be, we don't just write in one genre.
Yeah.
Most authors, you think, well, we know Stephen King only writes horror. We know
Hmm.
this. This has been proven over 20 plus books.
Hmm.
And I know there's more than 20, but I'm not going to go into his repertoire.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
then you have other authors that write in 2 or 3 different genres. And they do it
Hmm.
well. It just
Yeah.
depends on the mindset of the author.
Right. And I think, having put this out, so many people would be expecting me now to write something similar, and they would probably be surprised if I don't do something similar and sad and heart-wrenching. But I may, I don't know if I could again, because it really is hard to write something really heart-wrenching.
When you're doing, yeah, the heart-wrenching books, if you're really going to write it, it's going to take you 10 to 15 years
Yeah.
to do it right, because you're going to get into every single one of those emotions, versus when you're writing something fun or
Right.
flirty or fantasy or whatever, you can write it
Hmm.
within a year,
Right.
because you take away all the stronger emotions. You're
Right.
still making emotions in the book, but it's not
Hmm.
a weepy, here's a box of tissues and a box of chocolates while you're reading the book.
Right. Yeah, it's a totally different type of book. So, and it's fun too. I enjoyed writing that kind of book, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure how it's going to be received though. So, just hard to say.
You have your readers that follow the author and will give you honest feedback on anything you write.
Hmm.
And then you have your readers that are genre specific. Your genre specifics may or may not pick up your next book if it's not the weepy
Right.
issue books,
Right. Right.
but they
Exactly.
might and cross over into the genre.
Hmm.
Other ones who will read a chapter or two and say, it's not for me.
Yeah. So it's just, it's always art is a very subjective thing. And I was surprised on this novel how many 5-star reviews. It seems, usually I read a lot. I mean, if you go through the Amazon and look through the reviews of all the major novels,
Mhm.
etc., the big, they get the big hype and
Oh,
everything. And
yeah.
when you go through the reviews, it's like disappointed one. We get a lot of negative reviews
Mhm.
on them. And but my novel, for some reason, and I'm very humbly grateful for it, but seems like 95% are 5 and 4 stars. So it seems like I've never seen something that's so steadily producing 5-star reviews. It seems, it's just,
Yeah, you're 86% on 5-star by itself. Another
yeah,
10% is your 4 stars. You're less than 4% on you 3 and 2, and you have 0 1-star reviews. That is
yeah.
a phenomenal book. You don't
It,
find
re-
that even with your big multimedia, uh, big push blockbuster books. You don't
you,
find
you
that.
really don't. You really don't. I've looked, and most of them are in the 70% five
Mhm.
star, and then you'll have a lot of 1-star, 2-star.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that if my next book will be in that way too, it probably will be, 1-star, 2-star, 3. The average book is usually like that.
Hmm.
So, but this one, and I think the lesson learned is that if you really want to, write a 5-star novel that's received, in that way consistently, you need to really whack people over the head somehow. You can't just write like
Right.
mediocre stuff. You got to really have a real gut punch.
You have to write with your gut, what your gut
Yeah,
and your mind is telling you. You
right.
have to write the book in your vision and not go after your genres until you're at the end of the book. Then you
Yeah.
fine tune it and you edit it, and then you find your beta readers or your
Mhm.
editors, and then you find out where your market is.
Mhm.
If you're
So
writing
it's
for the market, you're not going to be writing for the market. You're going to be writing for money.
right. Unfortunately, it seems the publishing industry, they seem to want like a thriller that gets you turning the page
Mhm.
or a romance, but they don't want, see, my novel is kind of like gets you turning the page. This is probably another reason why I think it's so well received is it gets people turning the page to see what happens, but as they're turning the page, they're weeping.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of an unusual thing. You don't, either you're weeping or you're turning the page, for some thriller. But
Mhm.
to have it in combination is really kind of unusual, I think.
It is. I
Yeah.
mean, your big stream made publishers. Sorry, I want to go to media for some reason. They want
Yeah.
those action turn the page. If you're not enthralled in it in the first 10 pages, they
Yeah.
assume the reader's going to throw it away. They don't
Right.
have the literary agents that go, wait, we're turning a page or a corner and giving the reader something different.
Right. And you'll see a few breakout books that, like A Man Called Ove. I don't know if you know that book, but it was a debut novel. It's done real well, and it's kind of that odd, quirky, you know, humanitarian type novel. It's a very touchy feeling novel. It doesn't have any thriller aspect, but it's done real well. They made a movie out of it, so it does happen out there, but it's pretty rare.
It is. I mean, back when Chicken Soup for the Soul came out, everyone's like,
Mhm.
it's not going to be big. But here we are 10 years later, and there's how many books in the series?
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
one of the bigger, feel good, touchy feely kind of
Mhm.
series.
Yeah. So that, yeah, speaking of series, that's probably another thing that if you can write a series, that seems to help,
Mhm.
your sales, but this is not a series type novel. I mean, I could probably turn it into another sequel, but I don't think I want to do that.
No, let the lightning that struck on this one rest.
Yeah.
I mean, you could in 5 years go back and revisit, okay, I'm ready to sit down and tackle a sequel.
Mhm.
But realistically, it doesn't need one.
Right. It's a standalone for sure,
Mhm.
but it's been fun writing it, and it's really been fun reading the reviews. I flip through them a lot just to kind of read them. I'm always kind of waiting for the next review.
Oh, isn't it wonderful when we get a new review
Oh
or when
yeah,
our readers reach out to us personally?
yeah,
It's
and
wonderful.
yeah, all of those are stranger. There may be one or two friends in there, but most, I mean, they're all just from out of the blue. Just somebody from Indiana or somewhere has written a review. It's great to
We
read them.
love our readers. We love getting the feedback, and it
Yeah,
helps us grow as an author.
right.
Speaking
Yeah.
of, where can our listeners and our viewers find you?
I'm on authorlarryecenter.com.
Okay,
It's my website.
that's very easy to remember.
Hmm. Yeah,
Are you
and the book.
by chance on social medias?
No, I'm really not a social media hound. I don't really do much of that. I don't even have a Facebook page.
You're one
Um,
of the few authors that I've met or talked to on the show that does not have some type of social media, but it's
yeah,
okay. You have a website that readers can find you at.
yeah, and I just don't have it I never got into social media too much for some reason, but you
I
can
get
see
it.
me on the website. So, and it's like no other boy. I call it LNOB for short, just to remember it. It's Like No Other Boy is the
Mhm.
name. So,
And again, this is a wonderful book for parents, guardians, anyone that has a single family household, or those that need to understand autism.
right. It really, it really goes into it. There's a website about a real father who raises an autistic boy. It's called Autistic Daddy or something like Autism Daddy or something like that.
Mhm.
And he recounts kind of day to day what he's going through. And I learned a lot from reading that. It was kind of eye opening. And I think he's writing a book about his experiences too. So,
We do need these books as an autism mommy.
mhm.
These books are instrumental. I mean, my daughter's older now, so it doesn't really help me with raising her because she's already
Right.
raised. But at the same time, to look back, it's a window into everything I've gone through
Mhm,
and what others are still going through.
mhm. There's a couple books that are similar. There's one called Daniel Isn't Talking, which is about a mother raising an autistic child. And there's one called The Reason I Jump, which is about autism. The big one is probably The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime,
Mhm.
which they made a play about. But there's not a whole lot of novels about that autism.
There's really
Uh,
not. And
yeah.
it's a shame because this is a time now where we need it and we need the understanding.
Hmm.
Because as an outsider, I see a child having temper tantrum. I just think the child's a brat. As a parent, seeing the child have a meltdown,
Hmm.
it takes on a completely different meaning.
Right.
Two perspectives, same child.
Right. So it's it's a it's a good subject to learn about, and it's amazing how much there is to learn about it. It's a very interesting subject.
It
So,
is, but we are almost out of time.
okay.
And again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
And again, your website is authorlarryecenter.com.
Yeah. Right. Got
And
it.
for all of our listeners and our viewers, happy reading.